the forgotten acoustic guitar that broke John Lennon's heart forever. New York City, 1975. The East Village, a labyrinth of forgotten dreams and whispered histories. Its streets humming with the ghosts of artists and poets, and the relentless, indifferent pulse of a city that never truly sleeps. What if, on a gray afternoon, John Lennon walked into a dusty pawn shop and found not just an old guitar, but a forgotten piece of his own soul? A melody he had believed was lost forever. A song from a time before everything. A song that, once remembered, broke his heart in a way that no amount of fame or fortune ever could. The year is 1975. New York City, a colossus of steel and ambition, was a city in flux, its glamour often overshadowed by a gritty, sometimes dangerous reality. For John Lennon, it was a city of contradictions, a place where he had sought both anonymity and creative rebirth, and found instead a turbulent, lost weekend. A period of separation from Yoko Ono, marked by personal excess, creative struggle, and a profound sense of being unmoored. He was 35 years old, and the weight of his own history pressed down on him with an almost physical force. The Beatles were a decade in the past, their dissolution a wound that had never fully healed. His solo career, while marked by moments of brilliance, often felt like a desperate search for a new identity, a new voice, a new way to exist in a world that still saw him primarily as a Beatle. He walked the city often, especially in the afternoons, when the light was fading and the streets began to fill with the particular, restless energy of a city transitioning from day to night. He sought out the edges, the forgotten corners, the places where the city's true pulse beat beneath the polished surface. He was drawn to the derelict, the abandoned, the places that held the ghosts of other lives, other dreams. It was on one such walk, a gray, late winter afternoon in the East Village, that he stumbled upon it. A small, cluttered pawn shop, its windows crammed with an eclectic assortment of forgotten treasures, tarnished jewelry, dusty cameras, antique radios, and a haphazard collection of musical instruments, their strings broken, their bodies scarred by decades of neglect. John had always been drawn to pawn shops. They were places where stories were kept, where the detritus of other people's lives lay waiting to be discovered, to be given a new purpose, a new voice. He pushed open the heavy, protesting door and stepped into the dim, musty interior, the air thick with the smell of old wood, stale tobacco, and the faint, metallic tang of forgotten dreams. He browsed aimlessly at first, his eyes scanning the shelves, his mind drifting through the familiar landscape of his own creative block. He ran his fingers over the keys of a broken piano, plucked a few notes on a battered banjo, his thoughts a jumble of half-formed melodies and unwritten lyrics. And then he saw it. Tucked away in a corner, half hidden behind a stack of dusty amplifiers, stood an old acoustic guitar. It was cheap, unbranded, its body scarred by decades of use, its strings rusted and broken. But something about it called to him, not with the promise of fame or fortune, but with the raw, primal whisper of something that needed to be found, something that needed to be heard, something that needed to be remembered. He picked it up. It was light, almost insubstantial, its wood worn smooth by countless hands. And then he saw it. On the body of the guitar, just beneath the sound hole, a single, faded sticker. Its edges peeling, its colors muted by time. But the words were still legible. Liverpool, 1958. Hey, before we continue with this incredible story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube has removed their subscriptions without notice. Just take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any of the exclusive content that's coming up. And while you're there, leave that powerful like. That helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who is part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. John Lennon in 1975 was a man haunted by ghosts. The ghost of his mother, Julia, who had died in 1958, the same year, etched on the guitar. The ghost of Brian Epstein, the manager who had loved them and managed them and held them together, gone too soon. The ghost of the Beatles, the band that had defined his life, now a decade in the past, its dissolution a wound that had never fully healed. He was a man adrift, caught between the past and the present, between the demands of fame and the yearning for anonymity, between the chaos of his personal life and the desperate need for creative order. He had always been a seeker, a man driven by an insatiable curiosity and a relentless need to push boundaries. But in 1975, the boundaries felt like they were closing in. The pawn shop, with its musty smell and its cluttered shelves, felt like a portal to another time, another life. And the guitar, with its faded Liverpool 1958 sticker, was a direct link to that past. He ran his fingers over the worn wood, feeling the ghost of other hands, other dreams, other songs. He bought the guitar, not because he needed another guitar. He owned dozens, expensive, custom-made instruments that sat in their cases in his apartment, rarely played. He bought it because he felt an inexplicable pull, a sense of destiny, a feeling that this particular, forgotten instrument held a secret that only he could unlock. He took it home to his apartment on the Upper East Side, a gilded cage that felt increasingly alien to him. He cleaned it, carefully, meticulously, removing decades of dust and grime, revealing the warm, aged wood beneath. He replaced the rusted strings, tuning them with the practiced ease of a man who had spent a lifetime with a guitar in his hands. He sat in his study, the city lights twinkling outside his window, and began to play. He strummed a few chords, feeling the familiar vibration of the wood against his chest, the sound resonating in the quiet of the room. He played a few familiar melodies, songs he had written, songs he had loved, songs that had become the soundtrack of a generation. But then, as his fingers moved across the fretboard, something else began to emerge. A melody he had not heard in nearly 2 decades. A melody that was both familiar and strange, a ghost of a tune that had been buried deep in the recesses of his memory, waiting for the right instrument, the right moment, to be rediscovered. It was a song he had written with Paul, in Liverpool, in 1958. In the earliest, most innocent days of their partnership, before the Beatles, before fame, before everything. A song they had never recorded, a song they had played only a handful of times, a song he had believed was lost forever. As the melody emerged, clear and haunting, John felt a profound, almost physical ache in his chest. It was the ache of lost innocence, of forgotten dreams, of a past that refused to stay buried. It was the sound of a friendship that had been forged in the crucible of shared ambition and shared poverty, a friendship that had been broken by the relentless machinery of fame and fortune. He played the song again and again, his fingers moving across the fretboard with a mixture of reverence and pain. He remembered the day they had written it, sitting on Paul's porch in Fourth Lynn Road, their cheap guitars clutched in their hands, their heads filled with dreams of making it big, of conquering the world with their music. He remembered the laughter, the camaraderie, the effortless creative synergy that had defined their earliest collaborations. And he remembered the feeling of pure, unadulterated joy that had filled him in those days, a joy that had been gradually, inexorably, eroded by the relentless demands of fame, by the pressures of success, by the inevitable compromises that came with being the biggest band in the world. The guitar, with its faded Liverpool 1958 sticker, was not just an old instrument. It was a time machine, a portal to a past that John had believed was lost forever. And as he played the forgotten melody, the ghost of that past rose up to meet him, breaking his heart in a way that no amount of fame or fortune ever could. The song was simple, a raw, unpolished melody, its chords basic, its structure unadorned. It was the kind of song 2 teenagers, barely out of school, would write in a burst of creative energy, full of the earnestness and the awkward charm of youth. It was not a masterpiece. It was not a hit. It was, in its purest form, a promise. A promise made between 2 boys in a small, working-class city that they would conquer the world with their music. As John played the forgotten melody, the lyrics began to emerge, whispered from the depths of his memory, words he had not thought of in nearly 2 decades. They were simple words about friendship, about dreams, about the unbreakable bond between 2 people who were destined to change the world together. We'll walk together, hand in hand, across the sea, across the land. Our voices strong, our spirits free, just you and I, for all to see. He remembered the day they had written it. A warm summer afternoon in 1958, sitting on Paul's porch in Fourth Lynn Road, their cheap guitars clutched in their hands, their heads filled with dreams of making it big, of conquering the world with their music. They had played it for Julia, John's mother, who had clapped and cheered and told them they were going to be famous. He remembered the laughter, the camaraderie, the effortless creative synergy that had defined their earliest collaborations. And he remembered the feeling of pure, unadulterated joy that had filled him in those days, a joy that had been gradually, inexorably, eroded by the relentless demands of fame, by the pressures of success, by the inevitable compromises that came with being the biggest band in the world. He played the song again and again, his fingers moving across the fretboard with a mixture of reverence and pain. Each note was a memory, each chord a ghost, each lyric a whisper from a past that refused to stay buried. He played until his fingers ached, until the room was filled with the haunting melody of lost innocence, of forgotten dreams, of a friendship that had been broken by the relentless machinery of fame and fortune. He played until the tears came. Not the angry tears of frustration or the bitter tears of regret, but the quiet, cleansing tears of a man confronting a grief that he had carried, unspoken, for too long. The grief of a friendship that had been the foundation of his life, and that had been damaged in ways that neither of them had entirely intended. He played until the sun began to rise, casting long, pale shadows across the room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, the silent witnesses to his private confession. He played until the city began to stir, its distant hum a gentle counterpoint to the haunting melody of his forgotten song. When he finally stopped playing, the room was silent. The guitar lay across his lap, its wood warm against his skin, its faded Liverpool, 1958, sticker a silent testament to the power of memory, the enduring strength of forgotten dreams. He sat for a long time in the quiet of the room, the forgotten melody echoing in his mind, the ghost of his past rising up to meet him, breaking his heart in a way that no amount of fame or fortune ever could. He understood, in that moment, that some things, once lost, can never truly be recovered. But some things, once remembered, can never truly be forgotten. The rediscovery of the forgotten song, and the flood of memories it unleashed, plunged John into a period of intense introspection. He spent days in his study, the old acoustic guitar his constant companion, playing the melody again and again, trying to understand the profound impact it had had on him. He began to write. Not songs, not lyrics, but a letter. A letter to Paul. Not the Paul of the lawsuits and the competing management battles and the acrimonious public statements that had defined the decade of their estrangement, but the Paul he had known before all of that, the boy from Liverpool, the one who had stood beside him at the beginning of everything, the one whose absence had left a shape in his life that nothing else had ever quite filled. The letter was long, rambling, filled with confessions and regrets and the raw, unfiltered honesty that John had rarely allowed himself in his more public work. He wrote about Hamburg, about the early days, about the effortless creative synergy that had defined their earliest collaborations. He wrote about the joy, the laughter, the shared dreams that had propelled them from a small, working-class city to the biggest stages in the world. He wrote about the pain of the dissolution, the pain of the lawsuits, the pain of the unspoken words that had accumulated between them like a wall, growing higher and thicker with each passing year. He wrote about the specific, irreplaceable ache of losing a friendship that had been the foundation of his life. And he wrote about the song, the forgotten melody, the one he had rediscovered on the old acoustic guitar, the one that had broken his heart in a way that no amount of fame or fortune ever could. He described the moment he had found the guitar, the faded Liverpool, 1958 sticker, the flood of memories it had unleashed. He described the tears, the grief, the profound sense of loss that had overwhelmed him as he played the forgotten melody again and again. He wrote about the lyrics, the simple words about friendship and dreams, and the unbreakable bond between two people who were destined to change the world together. He wrote about the promise they had made to each other, a promise that had been broken by the relentless machinery of fame and fortune. He wrote until his hand ached, until the pages were filled with his cramped, distinctive handwriting, until the words flowed from him like a river, carrying with them the accumulated weight of a decade of unspoken truths. He wrote until the sun began to set, casting long, pale shadows across the room, illuminating the pages of his unsent letter, the silent testament to a friendship that had been both the greatest joy and the greatest pain of his life. When he finally stopped writing, the letter was long, rambling, filled with confessions and regrets and the raw, unfiltered honesty that John had rarely allowed himself in his more public work. It was a letter that he knew, instinctively, he could never send. Not yet. Perhaps never. The wounds were too deep. The unspoken words too many. The distance between them too vast. He folded the letter carefully, placed it in a plain envelope, and tucked it away in a drawer of his desk, alongside the photographs and the other private documents that constituted the archive of his interior life. It was a secret he would carry, a private confession, a testament to a friendship that had been both the greatest joy and the greatest pain of his life. He never sent the letter. But the act of writing it, the act of confronting his own past, of acknowledging the profound impact that Paul had had on his life, had changed something within him. It had broken his heart, yes, but in the breaking, something new had emerged. A fragile seed of hope, a renewed sense of purpose, a quiet understanding that some things, once lost, can never truly be recovered. But some things, once remembered, can never truly be forgotten. The rediscovery of the forgotten song and the writing of the unsent letter marked a profound turning point in John Lennon's life. The Lost Weekend, which had been a period of creative stagnation and personal chaos, began to recede, replaced by a new sense of purpose, a new clarity of vision. He began to make music again, but with a different quality. The raw, unfiltered honesty that had emerged from the echo chamber sessions, the confessional intimacy that had marked his best solo work, was now infused with a new tenderness, a new vulnerability. He was still capable of anger, still capable of polemic, but beneath it all, a deeper, more profound understanding of love and loss began to emerge. The old acoustic guitar, with its faded Liverpool 1958 sticker, became his constant companion. He played it for Sean, teaching him the simple chords, the basic melodies, the joy of making music for its own sake. He played it for Yoko, sharing with her the forgotten melody, the unsent letter, the raw, unfiltered truth of his heart. Yoko, who had always understood the depths of John's creative and personal struggles, recognized the profound transformation that had occurred within him. She saw the quiet peace that had settled over him, the renewed sense of purpose that had replaced the chaos and the despair. She knew that the old guitar, with its faded sticker, had unlocked something within him that no amount of therapy or political activism or creative experimentation had managed to do. The music he made in the years that followed, particularly the songs on Double Fantasy, bore the unmistakable imprint of this transformation. The album was a declaration of domestic contentment, a celebration of ordinary life, a profound artistic statement about the value of love and family. It was a sound that was simultaneously tender and strong, vulnerable and resilient, a testament to a man who had walked through the deepest, darkest corners of his soul and emerged, not unscathed, but renewed. He never spoke publicly about the forgotten song or the unsent letter. They remained his private secrets, his personal confessions, his testament to a friendship that had been both the greatest joy and the greatest pain of his life. But the impact of their rediscovery was visible in every note he played, every lyric he wrote, every word he spoke. He was, by every visible measure, a man who had found his way back to himself. The 5 years of domestic seclusion at the Dakota, years spent learning to bake bread, to be present for his son Sean, to exist in the world without the armoring apparatus of fame, had produced in him a quality of quiet that those who had known him in his most turbulent years found both surprising and deeply moving. He was calmer, more present, more willing to sit with a moment without immediately converting it into something else. He was 40 years old, and for the first time in longer than he could precisely remember, he felt like 40 was the beginning of something rather than the continuation of something that had already lasted too long. He had found his peace. A hard one, fragile peace, but peace nonetheless. A peace that had been forged in the crucible of lost innocence, forgotten dreams, and the terrifying weight of a past that refused to stay buried. The peace that John Lennon found in the mid-1970s was a hard one, fragile peace. It was a peace that had been forged in the crucible of lost innocence, forgotten dreams, and the terrifying weight of a past that refused to stay buried. It was a piece that was simultaneously tender and strong, vulnerable and resilient, a testament to a man who had walked through the deepest, darkest corners of his soul and emerged, not unscathed, but renewed. He spent his final years in the quiet domesticity of the Dakota, his music returning, his spirit renewed. He was making plans for the future, talking about a tour, writing new songs, living in the ordinary, forward-moving logic of a life being actively lived. He was happy, genuinely, quietly, deeply happy. The old acoustic guitar, with its faded Liverpool 1958 sticker, remained his constant companion. He played it for Sean, teaching him the simple chords, the basic melodies, the joy of making music for its own sake. He played it for Yoko, sharing with her the forgotten melody, the unsent letter, the raw, unfiltered truth of his heart. He never sent the letter to Paul. The wounds were too deep, the unspoken words too many, the distance between them too vast. But the act of writing it, the act of confronting his own past, of acknowledging the profound impact that Paul had had on his life, had changed something within him. It had broken his heart, yes, but in the breaking, something new had emerged. A fragile seed of hope, a renewed sense of purpose, a quiet understanding that some things, once lost, can never truly be recovered. But some things, once remembered, can never truly be forgotten. The forgotten song, the one he had rediscovered on the old acoustic guitar, remained his private secret. He never recorded it. He never performed it. It was a melody that belonged only to him, to Paul, and to the ghost of their shared past. It was a testament to a friendship that had been both the greatest joy and the greatest pain of his life. John Lennon died on December 8, 1980, on the pavement outside the Dakota Building in New York City. He was 40 years old. The peace he had found in the years of seclusion, the domestic quiet of bread and music and the daily, unremarkable miracle of being present for his son's childhood, all of it ended on a pavement on Central Park West on a Monday evening in December. The old acoustic guitar, with its faded Liverpool 1958 sticker, was found in his study, leaning against the wall, its strings still resonating with the ghost of the forgotten melody. The unsent letter to Paul was found in a drawer of his desk, folded and unfinished, its final sentence trailing off into the white space of a page that was waiting for a thought that never arrived. Yoko Ono, who had been informed of the letter's existence by John in the months before his death, found it in the drawer. She read it in the chair by the window, in the December light that fell across the desk, where John had sat 5 years before and written the truest thing he had written in years. She read it through once, carefully, and then sat for a long time looking at the last page, at the point where the writing stopped mid-sentence, the letter unfinished, the thought incomplete, the page still holding the white space of everything that had not yet been said. She did not send it to Paul immediately. She held it, privately, for weeks, processing it, understanding what it was and what it meant and what she owed to the person it was addressed to, and what she owed to the person who had written it, and how those two obligations could be honored simultaneously. When she finally reached Paul, in January 1981, in the white, stunned aftermath of a loss that the world was still trying to absorb, she read him portions of it over the phone. Not all of it. The most private passages she kept private, honoring John's interior life in the way she had always honored it. But enough. Enough for Paul to hear, in John's voice on those pages, the thing that the years of estrangement had obscured but never extinguished. Paul was silent for a long time after she finished reading. When he finally spoke, his voice was very quiet. When did he write this? Yoko told him. 5 years before. Paul was silent again. Then, I wish he'd sent it. A pause. I wish I'd known. New York City, 2024. The pawn shop in the East Village is gone, replaced by a gleaming boutique. The apartment on the Upper East Side where John Lennon rediscovered the forgotten guitar is now home to someone else, its walls silent, its memories absorbed into the indifferent fabric of the city. The old acoustic guitar, with its faded Liverpool 1958 sticker, is now in the private collection of Julian Lennon, a silent testament to a past that refuses to stay buried. The unsent letter to Paul McCartney remains private, its full contents known only to a select few. But the story of its existence, and the profound impact it had on John Lennon's life, has become part of the larger narrative of his legacy. It is a testament to the enduring power of friendship, the devastating weight of lost innocence, and the terrifying truth that some things, once lost, can never truly be recovered. But some things, once remembered, can never truly be forgotten. Paul McCartney has spoken about John in the decades since that phone conversation with Yoko, with a consistency and a tenderness that is its own kind of conversation, the continuing of a dialogue that was interrupted in the language they had always shared. He has spoken about the unresolved things, the conversations that did not happen, the words that were not said in time. He has spoken about writing songs in the years after John's death that were addressed to him directly. Conversations continued in music because music was the language they had always shared, the one that predated all the legal documents and management disputes and competing narratives, the one that had been there at the beginning and that endured beyond everything else. In My Life, Paul has said, is the song that makes him think of John most consistently. A John song, not a Paul song, but one that Paul has always felt was, in some essential way, also about their friendship. There are places I remember, all my life, though some have changed. The places of Liverpool, of Hamburg, of Abbey Road, of a decade of shared stages and shared hotel rooms, and the extraordinary, never-to-be-repeated intimacy of four people living inside the same impossible experience. Some forever, not for better. Some have gone, and some remain. The forgotten song, the one John rediscovered on the old acoustic guitar, remains unrecorded, unperformed, a private melody that belongs only to him, to Paul, and to the ghost of their shared past. It is a testament to a friendship that had been both the greatest joy and the greatest pain of his life. New York City breathes. The world turns. The music plays. And in the silence between what was remembered and what was forgotten, between the song that was found and song that was never shared, the most important question remains. What if the most profound truth about John Lennon's heart was not found in the anthems he sang to millions, but in a forgotten melody, played on an old, battered acoustic guitar, in the quiet of his study, in the dead of night? A song from a time before everything. A song that, once remembered, broke his heart in a way that no amount of fame or fortune ever could, leaving behind a haunting echo of lost innocence, forgotten dreams, and the terrifying weight of a past that refuses to stay buried?